Hello, my name is Naya. I am doing a melee Magicka Nightblade build because this is a playstyle that kind of got messed with recently. Most of the time we did dual wield for a lot of extra damage. In open world, you could use two-handed for momentum, which was technically better in a lot of ways. However, you could not hit nearly as high numbers as if you used dual wield. Now, dual wield still has very, very high magicka damage, or spell damage specifically. However, it does not have that special set of the special ability of having two sets active on the front bar, because we can do that with two-handed weapons now on both front and back bar. Because of the Summerset changes to two-handed weapons. So, as with my Destro Resto build, I am using Shackle Breaker and Alteration Mastery. These two sets are a very nice combo. It's pretty damaging. You may want to slap on more damage. If you don't want to use Shackle Breaker, you don't have to. You'll need to probably use Leeching Strikes instead of Siphoning Attacks then, to get some extra stam sustain so you don't get CC'd into Oblivion. And you could use then Innate Axiom or War Maiden. If you use Soul Harvest, use War Maiden. If you use Incap, then use Innate Axiom, because it will not only increase the damage of your in-cap, but I mean you can get a little bit out of forward momentum. The healing you get from forward momentum will still be pretty crappy though, so don't go in there expecting a lot to begin with. Now, as for like specific set pieces, you don't need to worry too much. I'm using Groftar as a monster set because Groftar is, as I commonly joke, Groftar is my fetish. I love the set. It goes through dodge roll, so it helps finish off dodge rollers. And Shackle Breaker gives us some nice max magic and max stamina, as well as Groftar being a max magicka one piece. We have a nice hefty amount of max magic. And our spell damage is fairly high too, because, you know, gold weapon, we get spell damage, enchantments, all that good shit. And we do get a little bit of damage from Shackle Breaker as well. Now we look at Alteration Mastery, and this is probably the most powerful sustain set, in my opinion. And when I say that, I mean it because it's versatile. It's all of your abilities. Magicka, stamina, ultimates, dodge rolling, blocking, sprinting, CC break. Everything is reduced by 6%. Also, the magicka recovery it gives is pretty nice. The spell crit is also pretty desirable, I find. Having the gloves of Alteration Mastery and the belt is just because those are the pieces that I have. You don't really need to worry too much about what piece is what. I just find it's cheaper to do this combination. I have an Oblivion damage on my front bar. You could put a Prismatic if you really feel like it, or you could put a Prismatic on your back bar. I know a lot of people doing that. Gilliam is one of them who has he does dual wield Standblade, so he's got a Prismatic on one of his weapons because it does a shit ton of damage to vampires, and there are a lot of vampires out there. So that cost reduction allows you to dodge roll more, it allows you to block more. We don't really have any Psijic skills on, so we're not going to be able to take advantage of most of the Psijic order passes, which is sort of unfortunate, but I mean, if we want to play this playstyle, we're going to have to kind of adapt to it. Mark is your flex spot, and looking at all these skills here, you know, we got your bread and butter burst, you got Shadowy Disguise, which is cloak, cripple, which is a nice damage over time ability that roots and snares our opponent, as well as gives us major expedition. And we have our snare removal via forward momentum, and then, you know, soul harvest or in-cap in some people's cases. Now the nice thing about using concealed weapon as a spammable is that we get access to going 25% faster when we're cloaked or sneaking. And now we can put Major Expedition on top of that and then go into cloak, and then we go 55% times faster, which is kind of nice. It's not super overpowered, it's just kind of cool. You could use channeled acceleration, and it doesn't actually Doesn't actually break cloak to cast, so you can still stay permacloaked, and you'll go very fast for quite a while. Now, that's pretty much the only way I've been able to fit one of these on my bar, so this build does not require you to use Summerset, or to have purchased Summerset, even though these are very powerful in PvP. Mark is that flex spot. This is your main CC when you aren't hitting someone with concealed from stealth. So, hitting someone with concealed from stealth, aside from doing a fair amount of damage, you're draining a lot of Magicka. That's over 5k cost. It's like 5.2 thousand Magicka that you're using to hard CC someone. As an opener, that's great. But otherwise, you're mostly better off at using Mass Hysteria, especially because Fear goes through block. Fear is an AoE, so it cannot be dodged. And the Snare gives is kind of good, but there are a lot of ways that stand builds in particular can purge Snare. And the main is whatever, because we have Shade. Shade is really fun now. Shade is, I don't need a target for Shade. So I could just, be walking around in my house, doing the thing, and then I want to go back upstairs. Slow to RP for you. Then we want siphoning attacks. If you need the magic regen, if you want the stam regen, that is also cool. But if you get the stam regen version, I would drop Shackle Breaker for something a little bit more damaging, like War Maiden or Innate Axiom. Healing Word is more or less our defensive spammable, as I jokingly refer to it. If we are being pressured, we want to hit Healing Word as much as we can. Well, as much as we are comfortable with. We do want to keep an eye on our resources, because it is a fairly expensive skill. Alteration Mastery helps with the resource drain a lot, but it is a fairly expensive skill nonetheless. The initial heal that we get from Healing Word is very important. That is our only really bursty heal that we can get, aside from like hitting someone with Soul Tether. So the Soul Tether is also a good one, especially in 1vx. Like, I have used Soul Tether when fighting 3 people. It stuns them all, does a fair amount of damage. I mark someone, I quickly finish them, depending on the target. So if I have Mark on the target when I finish them, I'm getting a lot of health back. So I am basically resetting the fight without having to go into Cloak. Sometimes I do have to go back in the Cloak because I break free and they retaliate very quickly. Most players aren't quite that skilled, unless you're only fighting on shore against other, like, 1vx super duper players. Theotherwise, Soul Tether will work. You can use Rest Alt here, but I've kind of fallen akin to Soul Tether, especially because Alteration Mastery reduces the cost of Soul Tether, which is the main reason I don't use it all the time on my back bar. So I'm kind of happy with that right now. Now, going back to our front bar, something to notice is that we can't spam forward momentum. If you spam forward momentum, you will run out of stamina and you will die. So be careful around that. You might have to take a few hits while you're snared or while you're rooted. If you're in a full engagement with, say, like a Magicka Dragon Knight, you might have to take a few hits. Or you might have to do a few heavy attacks, actually. But if we're going to be doing a heavy attack, we might want a Will, or we might want a Concealed Weapon right after. Or maybe even a Soul Harvest. We want big burst damage because of this passive here, Follow Up. Ever wonder why Stamblades are able to pop you so quickly? Because Follow Up. They do a heavy attack from stealth, go into Incap, surprise attack, and execute. So, yeah. You can take advantage of that even on a Magicka build. That will, it works on Magicka builds too. It's basically an Empower, and since they've completely changed Empower, that's kind of an interesting thing to still be in the weapon system that you don't get from anywhere else. So that's kind of cool. Otherwise, we can look at consumables. I'm basically using Witch Mothers, because why the fuck would I use anything else ever? You could use the Clockwork Citrus Food, but that is expensive, and even though I have a fair amount of money, I have no interest in drinking 10k every 2 hours. I don't need to waste that much. Looking more at our consumables, I've got PvE spell power pots. Yes, I use PvE spell power pots. If you want to slot stuff like, I don't know, entropy, when you're on Destro Resto, or even on melee. I don't suggest it for melee whatsoever, because on melee you need to be able to have more sense of surprise, and actually like surprising people. You need to have the upper hand a lot more often because you are pretty much weaker. You lack defensive heal over time abilities, because this is a pretty shitty heal over time. So I don't want to use entropy, because opening with entropy to get that extra damage is pretty much a dead giveaway. I'm going to attack someone. You can use it on Destro Resto, however, because you're typically less sneaky bursty, and you sustain a fight for a good 5 seconds before you have to make a kill, or before you have a good chance to make a kill, unless someone is just unbelievably squishy. So you could try and fit that somewhere, but I wouldn't. You could try and fit Inner Light somewhere for the extra max magic, or if you want the ability to spot, people who are sneaking, but I wouldn't, because bar space is a bit of a commodity. This back bar, this front bar is pretty much has to be the way it is. It's hard to change this. And up until here, if you're wearing Zans, you can drop Mass Hysteria. I don't like using Zans. I don't like my kill window being every 18 seconds. If your kill window is every 18 seconds, you're probably a bad Nightblade. So I don't use Zans, therefore having Mass Hysteria is pretty good. It'll help you deal with perma-blockers, but Zans totally shreds through perma-blockers. It wrecks their stamina. So having Mass Hysteria is kind of a must, especially if you're being like gangbanged by 2 people. Having Mass Hysteria is like having an unfuck me button. Snap your fingers and get off of me. It's just a quick get off of me. So I will often Mass Hysteria, rally, and then go into Cloak, kind of recuperate myself. This is your flex spot here. Mark. I use Mark because of the healing, as well as the Fracture. The Source of Fracture is very helpful for my damage. And the healing it does after I kill someone who is marked is actually pretty powerful. But with the amount of Stam Blades, especially Botards, that are all over the place right now, Piercing Mark is pretty useful, all things considered. So I don't often take that off my bar. There is, however, another skill that you can use in its place. Mirage. Especially if you're in a no CP environment, I would use Mirage. If you want, this build is not built for no CP. You could bring it into a no CP environment and do fairly well. You'll be a bit squishier though. However, I hate passive dodge. It shouldn't be in the game, but this skill is passive dodge, and it's for light armor, so you know what? Fucking use it. If you got the bar space, go for it. Use it. Stick on your back bar. A little bit of extra crit, so your crit chance for your healing ward goes a bit higher. Yeah, it's a solid skill. Although I typically use Mark because I'm fairly good at managing how much damage I take, unless I'm being zerged over. Because you get zerged, you get zerged. There's nothing you can do. So I use Mark to help accommodate for the extra healing. As for CP, it's not different at all from my Destro Resto video. I don't typically go over my CP, so we'll just look at the overview add-on really quickly. So for Steed, I got 66 into Ironclad, 55 into Resistant, 56 into Thick-Skinned, 28 into Hardy, 23, 19 into Elemental Defender, 31 into Bastion, 1 into Sprinter, 52 into Warlord, 54 in Mooncalf, 56 in Arcanist, 10 in Tenacity, 10 in Befoul, 13 in the Tumble... No, not 13. 13 in the Shadow Word, and 45 in Tumbling. 56 into Elemental Expert. 19 into Spell Erosion. I kind of just put my extra points here. You could put your extra points in Shattering Blows, though. Elfborn, I've got 66. Master at Arms, I got 66. And for Thaumaturge, I have 34. This is it's just it's pretty optimal. It's not perfect because I do a lot of things and I don't always change my CP. So it's kind of relative there. It is very much so user's choice when it comes to doing CP. When it comes to CP and traits in general, PvP builds are extraordinarily personalized. It's not just what's comfortable for your playstyle, it's also what's comfortable for your playstyle in the scenario you are, doing. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. You're free to kind of try this as you like. I would not do Vampire, though. I've had some people ask about Vampire because they want to be able to sneak around. I would not at all suggest Vampire. There's a lot of fire damage out there with Zons, and you don't need Mistform. The only reason you would ever want to be a Vampire in Cyrodiil is if you want Mistform. But since we have Forward Momentum, we do not need Mistform. Otherwise, I believe that covers just about everything. So, thank you for watching. If you want more details on how I do my CP, aside from just non-mathematically, I don't do the math as much. I grab my math from other people, put it together, and this is what I get. So, yeah, you can check out my Dustro Resto video. I go over CP a little bit more in depth there, and it's not different whatsoever. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the build if you do end up playing it. Have a good day.